We're going to dive right into the interview of the episode. To give you some backstory, I found this person via a podcast on the Ezra Klein podcast. It's an opinion podcast through the New York Times. And I found this person fascinating. He is a professor and he describes himself as a philosopher in the area of gaming, among other things. And so he has some really interesting thoughts. He came out with a book a few years back. And so I reached out to him and he was willing to have a conversation. And he is also a former Go player. So it really was a fun conversation and we will jump right into it. So without further ado, Thi Nguyen. Thi Nguyen, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, man.
Let me just start with your bio and your background a little bit because it's really interesting. So you're an associate professor of philosophy at the University of Utah, and your research focuses on trust, art, games, and communities. And you're interested in the ways that social structures and technologies shape how we think and what we value. So you have your PhD from UCLA, but at one point you were a food critic. You know, the big thing that we're going to really spend our time on for this conversation is about your book, Games, Agency as Art. Can you just give us a sense, like, how did you go from food critic in LA to professor on the philosophy of gaming and other stuff?
Actually, it was the other way around. I was already in a philosophy graduate program at UCLA. Then I got a job at the LA Times doing food criticism because I was drunk posting online food reviews and the LA Times food editor liked it. But I mean, I was already on the philosophy track. The weird question is how I got from like mainstream philosophy to doing philosophy of games. So,
and then my understanding is also that you were, when we were first connecting via email about having a conversation, you said that you were, once a Go player and you had reached the ranking of around 7Q, correct?
Yep. I was just starting to feel like I wasn't completely incompetent.
Yeah.
I think I see the full beauty of the game just little shreds, and then I had to stop.
Yes, that can make a lot of sense. Let's actually get into your book. You're referencing a philosopher named Bernard Suits. He's quoted as saying this line that I think speaks to a lot of us, particularly as Go players. He says that playing a game is the voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. And you quote this in your book when you're describing the whole point of a game, right? It's not to accomplish something as efficiently as possible, but within inefficient constraints and rules that are provided by a game designer. So in that context, how do you think about the game of Go, which is really interesting because, as you know, in the game of Go, you're still following these constraints. And I think it follows that rule, but you're trying to be as efficient as possible, right? You want to spread these stones out, cover territory, but if you're too over-concentrated, you're missing out.
I think this is the core weirdness of Bernard. So Bernard Suits, the book, The Grasshopper, is like the book that showed me the way to think about games. And the thing that you're identifying in Go is not unique to Go. I think it's a general feature of games, which is the weirdness of games is we accept some inefficiencies and then we act as efficiently as possible inside those inefficiencies, right? So I'm a rock climber. First, I accept some inefficiencies. I'm not going to use a rope. Right? I mean, I'm not going to use a rope to ascend. I'm not going to use a helicopter. I'm not going to use stairs. I'm just going to use my hands and feet to climb the rock. Once I've accepted those inefficiencies, I act as efficiently as possible. I think an easier way to put it is like a marathon. The way that Suits puts it, one way to think about it is what's special about a game is that the goal is partially constituted by its relationship to constraints. The goal isn't the goal unless you got there via the constraint. So in every game, there's a illusory goal and a pre-illusory goal. Sorry, this is just his technical language. The pre-illusory goal is the state of affairs you're trying to get to understood without reference to the constraints. So the pre-illusory goal of a marathon is actually crossing a particular point in space and time. The pre-illusory goal of basketball is moving the ball through the net. But then you have to add certain constraints to make it the real game goal. So the real game goal in basketball is making a basket. But notice that if you move the ball through the net by using a stepladder, you've moved the ball through the net, but you haven't made a basket, right? Similarly, if you move across this point in space where the finish line is in a marathon, you haven't crossed the finish line if you used like an Uber or a bicycle, right? So doing something, but doing it under constraints. So the constraints define the action and define the goal. And the way that Suits puts it is, in a game, we accept some inefficiencies that create the activity and the goal, and then we proceed as efficiently as possible within those inefficiencies. So we're trying to be efficient locally inside the game, but we're not being maximally efficient outside the game galactically. Because if you wanted to be efficient about moving through space, you would use a car, you wouldn't run, right? One way to put it is basically that for Suits, because the whole game is built around an inefficiency, that reveals to us that the point isn't just the simple outcome. The point is our being involved in the skilled activity, us actually exercising a specific sculpted skill, being involved in the effort and the struggle itself. That's where the value comes in. One way to put it is, I think that what Suits' theory reveals is that the value of games in most cases, or in many cases, is in the process, not the outcome. Because if it was just the outcome, you would act maximally efficiently.
And then you talk about this concept, which is striving play versus achieving play.
So striving play and achievement play are actually what I added to Suits. What Suits reveals is that there are two motivations for play. So achievement play is playing because you actually value winning, and striving play is playing because you want the struggle. And when you're a striving player, you get yourself to want to win temporarily, but it's not really what you care about. It's not the center of what you're doing. So one of my arguments for striving play in my book is that, so I play a lot of board games with my wife, and one of the interesting things about us is we have very different skill sets. So she is a chemist. So she's incredibly good at geometrical reasoning. So any board game that's Tetrisy at all, she will destroy me. I am very good at social deceit and incentive manipulation. So if a game is about social deceit and incentive manipulation, I will destroy her. And then once in a while, we'll find a game where we're perfectly balanced and it'll be beautiful. And then at night, I'll find an online strategy guide. Here's the interesting thing. She'll never read a strategy guide, and so I'm faced with this choice. If I read the strategy guide, I'll start winning, but the game will turn boring. And most of the time, I don't read the strategy guide, right? What I do is I try to keep my level at like the right level for this juicy, delicious struggle. This is, I think, the paradox of striving play. Go is going to be a weird, different example, but in a lot of other social gaming cases, it becomes really clear that what we're doing is holding back from being maximally skillful in order to have a really delicious struggle, but then during the game itself, trying as hard as we can to win. But let me give you an example. Party games. Imagine if you're the kind of person that looked up strategy for party games on YouTube to beat people at charades. You wouldn't be understanding the point.
Yeah.
The point is that there's a dumb activity that we're all about equal at, right?
And it actually leads to a question before I was going to quote a really relevant part of your book, which is that there's this challenge too about if you're playing somebody in a game and it is a casual versus not, right? So you talk in your book about Twister and that sort of thing, that it needs to be generally accepted or it needs to be perceived that everybody has spent maybe around the same amount of time doing that game. I mean, Go is interesting, right? Because if I play with a high level Don player who's probably been playing for years, but then I'm a Q player and I've still been playing for a while, but not nearly as long. There's this interesting dynamic where Go is unique because it has a handicapping system. And so you can do that. But with other games, if one person comes in and they're just way, way, way better than the other, because they've spent so much more time, to your point, it's just not going to be fun.
I often think there's this like social contract of gameplay, and you can see it. I love the example of like serious games and casual games. A lot of the times when I used to go to Go Club in LA, you'd start a game and you try to tune in to how seriously you both were taking it. And especially if you're not on a clock. I think a clock formalizes, but a lot of times if you're not on a clock, sometimes you're just in the mood. You're like, oh, we're just going to play a pretty casual game. And you don't think too hard because you're just playing a casual game. And other times you're playing a game and you're like, okay, no, we can take 3 hours for this game. And you kind of tune in on how seriously you're taking it. That's part of it. And we can see that part of what makes us good striving players is this tuning in to the level of seriousness that we're taking the game, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you even reference this, right? You talk about going to the LA Go Club and you had your mentor, Joe. and you say,
Oh, Joe, what a beautiful person.
yeah, a delightfully odd gentleman who made his living as a chess tutor. He'd show up every Wednesday and Thursday, but then you kind of go on and you say, it's interesting. Joe was a model of gameplay behavior. He played to the limit, fighting tooth and nail, but seemed to be equally pleased to win or lose, as long as the game was interesting. So you kind of get back to that point of like, it's all about the struggle, right? If you're just caring about, winning and those sorts of things, it's not going to be nearly as enjoyable.
I remember this moment. So, Joe was this incredible teacher, this incredible mentor, and he was obviously so far past me that we weren't within 9 points of each other. So we could never, we weren't in a normal handicap of each other.
Sure.
So it was mostly only teaching games. So it's getting better and better. And one day we were doing like a 9-stone handicap game, and it suddenly became clear that I was giving him a real game for once. And you could see his mood change. Like he was he wasn't just teaching me, he was locked in and we were really playing. And then he was having a great time, and then I fucked it up. I just made like one crucially bad move, and so he was going to win, and his reaction was just he was sad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is very much, I think, an exemplar of what it is to be a striving player and in it for the beautiful struggle. I think if we were all achievement players, when our opponent screwed up, we would be happy. But I think this is particularly distinctive of Go players, right? I see this so often in Go players. Like, the game is beautiful. It's so good. And if the other person screws up, you're going to win, but it's really just sad, right? Because the beautiful part of the game is over. And you could just see like the joy drain out of Joe because he was like, oh, crap, I'm going to win. Like, come on.
It's so funny you say that because like I can definitely relate with if I have a close game and it stays close throughout the game,
so good.
It feels great. Now, I think the only other time where it would feel good would be if I'm playing somebody that's a better rank than me, and then all of a sudden I somehow get the upper hand, and like that probably feels good as well. But it's interesting because I was talking to another gentleman who spent time playing Go in China, and he would talk about how in certain contexts, like playing in the park with the older gentlemen that played Go there, he would say, well, actually, people were all about like the thrill of the kill. So like they wanted to absolutely blow the other, the opponent out of the water, which is actually very different from that. Okay, so then you shift over and you talk about this balance between, hey, you need to care enough about winning the game. Otherwise, what are we doing? To also enjoy the struggle. And so you actually talk about this when you're tying it back to the game of Twister. It's like, if you're like, I don't care about playing Twister at all, it's a party game, and you're just like, I don't care, then everybody's just sort of is like, this is stupid, we shouldn't be playing it. But then if you go to saying, well, no, like I want to care a little bit, and then you mess up, then everybody's really enjoying it. And you even reference like Go in this section of your book. You say, similarly, I might easily prefer a session of Go where I screw up an early sequence, which maybe you're talking about like Joseki, like in the beginning of the game or whatever it might be, but which leads us into an utterly new and fascinating situation that I end up losing over the session where I play perfectly and I actually eke out a really dull win.
Right. I mean, this Twister example was supposed to be another argument for striving play. By the way, I should say about your people that want the thrill of the kill, my claim is not that striving play is the only way to play. It's that there are two different ways to play. Some people, achievement players, care about the victory, and other people care about the struggle. Imagine you had a choice. Imagine you could have a life of easy victories, destroying everyone around you because you were just better. Or you could have a life where you had a lot of interesting games, most of which you lost. Maybe you won a few, but they were really interesting. And I think that decision will reveal whether you're an achievement player or a striving player. Here's another maybe interesting example. One of the reasons that I don't play Go as much anymore is that I moved away from LA to Utah, and there just aren't that many players. Even as a 7Q player, I can't find good games live, and I just spend too much time on a computer and I want to play online.
Sure.
And so, like, one of the reasons I play many more European board games now, and one of the nice things about that is because there are so many, you can keep circulating them. In your game group, you'll all be about the same. Like, I don't want to be the kind of player that gets really good at Settlers of Catan, just beats everyone every time. That is boring. I want to change games so I can have interesting games, right? Yes. And that's another sign of being a striving player.
Kind of also goes back to this point, though, that Go is a horrible party game. Right?
It's a horrible party.
Because like you come and you're like, oh, I'm a 7Q, and like it took me quite a while to get even
Yeah.
to that level. I mean, at least for me, I'm maybe a 9Q on
Right.
an online server. Like it took me a long time to get to that
It
level.
is hard.
Right. So it's horrible for that because then the people with whom you're playing can't get up to speed very quickly in a social setting. But then when you talk about how I don't really want to play this game anymore because I'm already on the computer a lot. Also, you have a family life and work life. The other piece of this is that now, with the advent of online Go servers and online gaming, I find this very interesting interplay between people treating Go as there's always the striving play
Yeah.
that you come up with, but there's also the winning side and the rank fixation becomes very strong because it's online and you can see after every game. And so I think a lot of us are at odds with this. Oh, I really enjoy the struggle and I love it. But then, oh gosh, that rank number is there. That score is there every time it's going up and then it's going down, it's going down. And then that brings in other feelings. And then people say like, oh, I don't want to play at all because like, I don't want to keep losing. Have you seen this happening or do you have any thoughts on,
Yeah.
on how that's been changing over time?
So since I've written the games book, most of what I've been writing about is not games anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
gamified rankings in ordinary life.
Hmm.
So I have a bunch of papers about this concept I'm calling value capture. And value capture is what happens when what you actually care about is rich and subtle, and then you can put in a setting next to a simplified scoring system, and that scoring system takes over. So, maybe you're a journalist who cared about truth, and then you get obsessed with click numbers or subscriber numbers. Or maybe you went on social media to connect to people, but then you get obsessed with like likes and follows and
Yes, you
retweets.
spoke about this in your Ezra
Yeah.
Klein podcast
Yeah.
interview, which was phenomenal. Yeah.
Most of my examples there are examples outside of games, but I also think it can happen in games. And what that looks like is if you played a game originally because it was delightful and interesting, and you get so obsessed with ranking that it pushes you into horrible, ugly play or kinds of activity that you're not interested in. I remember at some point, I really enjoyed advancing at various points through rock climbing. And as I was getting older, it became clear in order to advance I would have to do this really specific finger strength training routine, which I found really
Interesting.
unpleasant. And it didn't make rock climbing any more fun for me. It just like made me able to climb harder stuff. And I kind of started hating it. And then I had to step back
Interesting.
and be like, why am I doing this? Why am I making myself do this? And I realized it's because I've been obsessed with this scoring system, and that's not actually why I'm playing the game, right? That's not actually what drove me into the game. I think Go is an interesting there are some games, I think, where your skill at the game is unrelated to the pleasure or interest of the game. So I think there are a lot of party games where if you
Okay.
get better, it doesn't necessarily make the game better. You're going to beat people, but the game's not more interesting. And then there are other games like Go, where the interesting thing about Go is that as you get better, the game actually gets more interesting. And so we get this really interesting choice where, like, I think some people are trying to get better at Go because they're achievement players and they want to win. And there are other people that want to get better at Go because it leads to more interesting and rich play. But I suspect in a lot of cases of value capture, what makes the value capture happen is the prominence of the ranking, right? Like the more
Mhm.
prominent GPA becomes for students, the more they orient it towards grades instead of education. The more prominent retweets and likes is, the more people start aiming for that instead of aiming for communication. It's fine to want to get better at Go because the game is more interesting, but if you become obsessed with the number on your rank and that leads you to a kind of lifestyle with a game where it's boring, grinding, or uninteresting, what are you doing? Like, why are you like, what is this for? Like, why the hell are you doing this? And AI can beat you already. It doesn't matter. You're doing this because it's enjoyable and interesting for you to do it. So if the joy goes out of it, like, what are you doing?
There's almost this meta constraint where,
Yeah.
for me personally, I say, okay, I've gotten into this game not early in my life. I'm in my late 30s. I have a family, but the game is so fascinating. The pandemic allowed me to get into it. Otherwise, I don't think I ever would have.
Yeah.
And then once I got into it, I said, okay, this is really enjoyable, but I would hit up against all those things that you just spoke about, right? You get overly focused on rank, you get overly focused on winning or losing. And then I realized that, you know what, there's also a satisfaction and a value in playing that game. And if the focus is for me, it's improving. There's also a value in doing it in a thoughtful way that's not just overload, right? Like to your point, if I just go overload and I start playing it way too much, I'm also going to get burned out and frustrated, or I'm going to go on tilt or something like this. So I think your point is really well made about this concept of giving these very clear rules and constraints, but then you even need to look at that within your life and how you're playing that game if it's not a party game, if it's a more serious game where there's just a million levels of understanding. And T, you actually talk about in your book about this concept when you are trying to highlight how in Go there is that ability for an experienced Go player to see something on the board that a less seasoned one just will not see. You kind of talk about you're comparing it to I think it's Jane Eyre, to the book, and saying, hey, like if anybody reads Jane Eyre, most of us can understand like, hey, here are the key themes, or here's what's going on. I kind of equate it to like if anybody's watching a sport, like if they're watching
Yeah.
hockey, you don't need to know much about hockey to know that if you get the puck in the net, you've scored a goal. And if you can do that quickly, then that's great. But with Go, you look at this board, and when I looked at it as a beginner, I don't know about for you, nothing is registering. Like it's just it's not making any sense. But then over a very, very long period of time and the pattern recognition of these better players, they just understand, oh, you do this, you play this, or you do that.
Yeah, one of the incredible things about Go, the beauties of Go are so strikingly inaccessible, especially the beauty of the opening game. I think like the subtlety of the opening game. Sorry, I haven't played Go in so long. It's so sad. It was such a beautiful part of my life, but like the subtle ability to see whole sequences and possibilities and strategic flow coming out of subtly different moves and spatial. God, I can't, I've totally lost my language. It's been so long in the opening
No,
game.
I'm with you. I
I
think
think,
everybody that's listening understands what you're
yeah,
talking about.
one of the interesting things about Go is how long it takes to even be able to see any of that kind of strategic, big scale stuff in the opening. There was a term for this in one of the classic Go strategy books, but sometimes you get this moment, and it'll often be like in early mid game to mid game, where you step back and you suddenly see that the move before you is completely decisive. Do you know what I mean? And it's not
Yes.
decisive in a small scale, I'll win this fight. It's going to change the complete flow of the game, right? Like you move
Right.
here and suddenly all the fights will cascade this way. You move there and everything will stabilize. Or like you make this one move and suddenly all of the fight will careen across the center into, and like, I think for me, the most beautiful experience of Go was being able to spot when that was I would have, not as a good player, I would have just blasted through those moments. And now you're like, "Oh,
Yes.
this is one of decisive moments. It will change the entire shape of the game." And I think, like, it was only, like, around 12Q when I started even being able to spot those even have an inkling of them. And I think, like, really being able to see them was what, like, when I was really getting better than 10Q, that's when I was like, I can spot those. That's, like, a lot of work. So I felt like I was just getting the glimmerings of the beauty of that game.
That's really cool to hear you say that. And you do speak about that. You say that there are things that when you think about, like, do I get something beyond just the skills or the ability to play that game well? There are things that apply to outside that game itself in the real world. And you actually say this. You say a Go player needs to constantly evaluate the strategic value of each particular fight against the whole landscape. And you said that this way of thinking is actually leaked out to the rest of your agential life because you're talking about games as ways of having different agency. I should care about this thing. These should be my goals and motivations. And so you say that Go has actually made the mental move for you of stepping back and reflecting on the comparative value of your current pursuit or different things that are happening in your life. Do you feel like that is actually still like held through, even though it's been years and years since you played?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think both chess and Go profoundly gave me a kind of mental skill, and they were very different. So I played chess first, and chess is the thing that actually probably made me good at like the nitty-gritty of philosophy. Like chess taught me to be a rigorous, logical person, to look ahead,
Mhm.
to make sure everything was tight, to make sure, right? But I think the deep difference for me between chess and Go is that chess is one fight, and like Go is, 9 or 12 fights happening at once that you constantly have to be deciding between. And chess, you have a little bit of this, but rarely you have to be like, which of these three completely currently disconnected fights is the most worthwhile one. You can see this, especially like I think the typical beginner stance in Go is to just get stuck on the fight you're at. The moment where I first felt like I understood what the nature of the game was when I could have a thought like, well, I could win that fight, but is it more important to play the first piece in this empty you know what I mean, right?
Yes, right. Or do I capture these stones that are right in this local fight, but over in another part of the board, I could save and make many more points or save
Right.
many more points.
Right.
That's a level of progression in the game.
Yeah. That is the experience of Go, constantly moving between the little picture and the big picture. I think that's
Mhm.
incredible. There are very few games that do that as intensely as Go. It's interesting. That affects all of my life, but it's also interesting the way it affects other games. There are plenty of board
Hmm.
games. I play with a lot of game players who play a lot of Magic the Gathering. We'll play like random European board games, and they'll often be much better at manipulating all the special powers and like legaling out all the different and like doing a little bit more hardcore calculation. And there are all these times when I'll win a game, and when we look back and try to figure out, we often do breakdowns. Why
Okay.
did you win that game? I wasn't tracking all the little stuff, but there's a moment where I was like, oh, here's the big picture that's really important. I can feel my Go brain turn on. I can feel it in board games. I can feel it in like fights at the administration of my university. I can feel all these cases where I can feel Go mind come in and step back and be like, is this fight worth having? Is it better
That's
to
really
spend my resources somewhere else? Go asks you to do that literally every move.
maybe we can also, talk a little bit more about thinking about Go in the world of just all the games that you've come across, right? I'm sure it's very specific in a lot of ways, but how do you position Go in that world in terms of it being a form of art and the creation of agency? You told me in your email when we first connected, you said, I think Go might be the most beautiful game in existence. Tell us more about that.
It's one of these things that is so hard to explain, except I think most of the listeners to this podcast will know. The degree to which the large scale, subtle strategic questions interact with the specific tactical questions, and the degree to which you can find an elegant move that like solves a tactical situation. You've probably had this experience where like, here's the tight solution to this tactical problem, but this move also solves that tactical problem, but also creates a potential for a cascade that will cross seeing the integration of the big picture and the little picture and the big picture, there's not anything else like it. And the richness, especially in the opening game of like this strategic potential and the kind of waves of possibility that move off of every move. I just don't know another game like it. I feel like I can see more into someone's like soul and style from how they move in a Go board than anything else. It's beautiful. There's another universe where I would have only played one game and it would have been Go, and that would have just been it. And a lot of what happened was there was some social, like a lot of social circumstances. I think also another thing that happened was so rock climbing is, I think, an also incredibly rich activity.
Mhm.
And it's also the kind of activity that do you devote your life to, or a huge amount of your life. A lot of the board games I play these days are not life devotion activities. They're, play it 10 times with your friends and move on. And I think I had room in my life for one life devotion activity. It was
Yeah.
Go or rock climbing. And I
Yes.
mean, a lot of the choice was just, I'm an academic. I spend the rest of my time indoors, crouched over a table. And so rock climbing is also a rich, dense game, but also makes my body not hurt. So
That's totally fair. And actually, it's funny you say that because there's a content creator who's a really nice guy, and his two big interests are Go
yeah,
and rock climbing, which is
It-
really
it's,
interesting. So I don't know if there's just pure coincidence or what.
I don't think it's coincidence. Since I've been in Utah, I've started fly fishing. They're all really fly fishing and climbing and Go are in this constellation of incredibly rich, high attention, high depth, very like meditative, very like trance state activities. They're all very
Interesting.
aesthetic and sensitizing. It is unsurprising to me if anybody likes one of these things that they would also like the other, although you don't find a lot that do all of them because each of them is individually a life consuming. If you're into fly fishing, you're into Go, you might just spend all your spare time doing that.
How do you think about the game of Go in terms of its ability to actually gain popularity within a population, particularly a Western one, because it's really having its roots in Eastern culture?
Okay, if we knew nothing about the games and you gave us chess and Go, And you're like, okay, which one's Eastern, which one's Western? Do you think you could tell? It's not maybe.
I'm
I don't know.
trying not to laugh, but yeah.
Yeah. There are historical reasons why Go is more popular in Asia than in the West. I think, for example, ancient Chinese poetry is really inaccessible to people that haven't had a lot of study in that culture. I don't know. Take a chess player, teach them Go. If they don't know anything about Asian culture, they often get super into it. I think the gameness is more like the universality of math. It seems pretty abstracted away from particular cultural origins. Do you want my dumb argument that Go is better than chess?
Absolutely. Let's hear it.
I don't know if the world will hate me for this. And I have known a lot of people that learned chess and then learned Go and never went back to chess. I have not heard of anyone who learned Go and then learned chess and was like, oh my God, chess.
Interesting. That's
But
interesting.
This also might be because I'm in the West. Maybe if I was in China, we would meet a bunch of Go players who had fallen in love with chess. So that might be a biased information set.
Yes.
But as far as I know, and maybe I'm just projecting from my personal experience, I learned chess first, and then I learned Go, and I was like, I'll never go back. Actually, I have gone back because my 8-year-old got excited about chess because he found chess TikTok, and he learned chess, and he wants to play chess.
Wow.
So I play chess again now, 100% with my 8-year-old. I just think like once you see the strategic broadness of Go and that need to go in and out of the big picture to little picture, chess feels really small. I probably studied chess as much as I studied Go, and it's hard to go back.
Okay, very quick couple questions for a lightning round. What's your favorite memory of playing Go?
I already told it to you. It's
Okay.
the moment with Joe where I was like, where I gave him a good game for one split for like 10 minutes. And then he was so sad when I fucked it up.
And I think we also answered it as well, but why did you stop? What would it take for you to return to your life in a regular way?
I love gaming physically. I played a bunch on online servers. I played a bunch on Casado. But I just like the physicality of gaming. And if they're a thriving community, I think I could go back. But it's hard not to be far away from a Go club where you can like hang out. Also, time-wise, my gaming time is very much like also friends and family time. I've only got like an evening or two for games that I can squeeze in with my friends. And so I tend to play European board games that we can all learn. So it's really the social environment. Whenever I think of Go, it's like, oh my God, I missed that game.
Can you give us a recommendation? What are, 1, 2, 3 games you think Go players should check out and why they might appreciate them?
Oh my God, that's a great question. For strategic richness, there's an old classic European board game called El Grande by Wolfgang Kramer. It is technically nothing like Go, but the strategic decisions are as rich as Go. I mean, maybe not as rich, but it felt in the vicinity. And the core strategic decision is you have this board state, you're all moving pieces around, trying to crowd areas. It does actually feel a little bit like Go abstracted for 5 players. And then every turn, there are 5 possible actions that get turned up that are all totally different in strength and totally different what they do, like really distinct, like move all your pieces across the board. And then you bid money on what order you'll pick your action from. And that decision is just so complicated and strategically rich. That's amazing. There are all these games from the great German game designer Rainer Knizia. He definitely loved Go, and he was interested in making multiplayer games. I think his classic game Tigris and Euphrates, the newest one in this school is Babylonia, but like the hard Knizia games where you place tiles are clearly him trying to translate the feel of Go for 3, 4, 5 players. It's really great. The most interesting modern game I know is Root by Cole Worley. People that like Go really like Root because it's completely different, but it has a lot of strategic richness and it does something that Go could never do. So the core of Root is that there are different political sides. One side is the industrialists, one side is the communist revolutionaries, one side is the arms dealer, one side is the religious leader, and each one has totally different rules and totally different goals. And over many games, you change sides. And so that game is amazing and gives you something that Go would never give you, which is asymmetry of rules and goals.
Thi Nguyen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, quick break. It's time to thank our individual contributors. I really appreciate it. It really helps. And also the sponsors for the episode. The first sponsor is AI Sensei. You can get your games analyzed with their advanced AI for free. They also have paid versions where you can get higher playout levels. And you can take your Go to the next level by using quizzes, remembering board states, all sorts of stuff. You can go to ai-sensei.com to learn more. This episode is also sponsored by Go Magic, which is a modern way to study Go like never before, with an online platform to learn the game of Go. They have this awesome thing called Ghost Mode, where you can try a problem and really test your reading skills without seeing the moves that you play. You can find them at gomagic.org. SmartGo One is also a sponsor of the episode. They are a place where you can go to find all sorts of things like learning to play the game, practicing against a computer, studying master games, solving problems, and reading Go books. It's available in the App Store for iPhone, iPad, Mac, and Go books are also available on an EPUB format for other devices too, so check them out. And then finally, our last sponsor for the episode is Baduk Pop, which is a great app to use for players of any level to play games against people all over the world. You can download their app at the App Store or go to badukpop.com. That's BADUKPOP.com. And with that, we will jump right back in. Now we're going to talk again with TelegraphGo, where I ask him the question, what is your favorite variant for the game of Go? To which he responded, Pixel Go, which I'd never heard of before. So let's jump on over to that, and he's going to explain to us exactly what Pixel Go is.
So Pixel Go is a variant where you place 2x2 blobs on the board. And if one of those 2x2 stones is like already existing on the board, then you don't put a stone there. So for example, if you put 4 stones on 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, and 2, 2, that's legal. You can do that. And then if the next person put 4 stones on 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 3, and 3, 3, then they wouldn't put the stone over your like 2, 2 stone, but they would put the other 3 stones down.
Huh. So it has to overlap or no?
So it doesn't have to overlap. You can put the 2x2 blob wherever you'd like, but it often does end up overlapping. The stones come in contact with each other eventually. And Pixel Go is really interesting because of a few reasons. Life and death is really weird because you can put 2x2 at once. So like a diagonal 2 eyes, which are just one diagonal away from each other, is actually killable. That's only one eye.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
There's all sorts of like territory shenanigans and stuff. The way that the contact fights work, it tends to be a race in like one direction where each player can play a pixel that curls on top of the other pixel, and then the other person can play a pixel that curls back on top of the other one. I don't know how to describe it if you haven't played.
So instead of a running battle, it's like curling, kind of?
It turns out to be kind of like a running battle, but it works fundamentally quite differently since each person's follow-up to the running battle is like a giga turn where they turn and play the next move on top, and it's like completely crushing. But you still have to allow that sometimes in order to keep speed. I liked it.
That's cool.
I think it's really interesting.
Do you play that when you're just like, I don't want to do actual serious Sumego or a game? You might just go there at an odd hour with a friend, or are you just picking it up randomly?
I haven't played it in a while, actually.
Okay. We're going to now talk to my Go teacher, Nathan Harwit, who is around a 6-dan amateur player, very well established in the Go community out in Boulder, Colorado. I wanted to sit down with him and just talk through some of the more recent themes and lessons that I've been gaining from our sessions together, because I think it is useful for people that are at my level of play, whether that's 8, 9, 10Q range and possibly lower and higher. So we're going to jump over to that conversation now. And Nathan's going to give us a little bit of an explanation And I'm going to sort of play with some of those concepts in real time because I think they are things that a lot of us think about. So let's get to it. All right. So what I was thinking, Nathan, was that you've been able to give me these really nice themes throughout our time working together. And I just thought that it's helpful for us to actually share that because they almost boil down to being pseudo proverbs in a way. So for context on OGS, I'm what? Somewhere around the 8 to 9Q, something like that, depending on the time format. And we've been working through some of these themes. So I can either mention a couple of ones that I think of, or there are some that it sounds like you've already written out. So maybe you want to go first.
Yeah, the main one I was going to talk about is starting from the greediest move and working the other way. That's like the major thing I see. But then the other one wasn't really game related. It was more just like a mindset thing of you make some small improvements to your game and you're just slightly better, that can have really large cascading effects. And then I was going to talk about like if you're at your rank, like you said earlier today, actually, it's like 50-50. You win half the game. So 5 out of 10, let's say. But if one of those games, because you improved a little bit, you actually won the game that you would have lost, you're now at 6 wins, 4 losses. And if you keep that win rate up, that actually means you improve your rank at least and you go up a lot.
Okay, great. So that's perfect. Let's actually start with that real quick. So you were talking about this concept. What I've been noticing, depending on what time format I play on OGS and these sorts of things, is that I will be at a certain rank and then I will float and fluctuate around up and down a rank or two. And I'll find like, wait a second, I'm losing against a rank that's one lower than me. But then to your point, you're saying, hey, Travis, that's actually fairly expected. Not only are there a bunch of different styles, but also the fact that if you are at a true level or rank, you should be winning, what, half of those games?
Roughly, yeah. If you're evenly matched against your opponent, you should win about half the time.
So how do you think that works out? Like, let's say, if I'm a 10Q and I play a 14Q, it's really just balance of probability, is it not? So it's like, if I think about the weather and I say there's a 30% chance of rain and it rains, that doesn't mean the probability is wrong, right? 3 times out of 10, it can still rain. So in this case, we're saying the same thing. It's like, of course you can lose against a weaker player, but the idea is that if you're truly at that 10Q rank, you should only lose to that 14Q, a minority, right? Less than half
Yeah.
of the time.
There's actually some math behind it because it's, I think, the Go rating systems and ELO, you can convert it to an ELO system.
Yes.
Each stone is about 100 points. And in chess, I believe if it's 100 points, like your one stone, if you're 10Q against 11Q, you should win 66% of the time, about 2/3. One stone is about 66%. 2 stones is closer to like 75-ish. Then 3 stones and up is like 80 to 90% range. So if you're 10Q and you played a 13Q, you should win about 4 and 5 games, roughly.
That's really helpful. Got it. So if I'm playing 3 to 4 stones up, I should win roughly
80, 90%. Yeah.
3 out of 4 games ish. And
Yeah.
if I'm not, that means I'm not really truly my rank. I'm not really settled, right?
You probably have to get in at least 10 games because you can't just be like, oh, we cherry picked one game and we lost it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're actually 13Q. It's like, no.
Right. You need a sample size. You need more than just 1 or 2 to understand if it's a fluke or if it's something else. I also almost find that the way I'm thinking now about how I'm doing in terms of am I going up in rank or down in rank, which is not the most important thing, but it is a thing, is now what I'm doing, instead of looking at what my actual rank is, I'm trying to say, how many people have I played of a certain rank and how many of those have I won or lost?
Yeah, that's good.
Because that's starting to like, okay, so this last batch, you've recommended like, hey, if you want to improve, maybe you should be playing somebody at your rank or maybe 2 or 3 stones stronger. It'll just more clearly outline your weaknesses. And what frustrates me more is that the ranking system, I can actually get higher and higher in rank, but only play weaker players.
Yeah, I think the
to a
system
degree.
on OGS is slightly messed up for that.
Right. But I mean, theoretically, if I lose one of those weaker matches, it should really hurt my ranking. So it's
Should, yeah.
okay. That makes a lot of sense. So then the other thing you're talking about is We did talk on a previous setup about the like play the greediest move, but maybe you can just re-articulate that for me.
Yeah. So I'd say a major issue I see the most when I'm teaching like the 20Q to even 5Q range and even slightly stronger is most players start from, I mean, it makes sense because emotionally you're like, oh, I need to protect myself and not get killed here. I need to think about how to escape and run away and not die. But the problem with that logic is then most of the time in that 20Q to 5Q range happens the most is that people just kind of default to that safe mindset and they don't really think about attacking the opponent. Because if you start with the greediest move and you work backwards, if the greediest move, which is like the attacking move, aggressive move, actually ends up working because it kills the opponent, and by killing them, you also protect yourself, that has to be better than just only defending yourself because you literally killed them. So then you generally also saving your time because a lot of these online games are timed. You want to start from the most aggressive, greedy move. And then if that doesn't work, you can always default to your safe move instead of doing it the other way where you oftentimes don't even think about the kind of aggressive, greedy move.
Do you think part of the reason why people might not naturally lean towards it? Some people do. If they're more aggressive in their nature, they will. But others that are not, like myself, I'm not naturally leaning that way. Is part of it that there might be this perception around how much I'm winning and losing? Because we are all affected by it. So I would imagine that way of being greedy and doing the greedier way may lead to more losses. Whereas I don't know how to think about it. It's like you might get more losses, but you might learn more things that don't work. But if you play the defensive moves, you've lost maybe, and you haven't even learned anything because you didn't try
Yep.
anything.
Yeah.
I see.
So the main thing there is that I think the main reason people default to the safe move is it feels really bad to get your group killed. It feels really bad. So you just like try not to die. And then if you play the aggressive move, it means you're more likely to die, but they're also more likely to die. And like you said earlier, you learn way more when you're playing these aggressive, greedy moves than if you always play the safe, like, well, I'll just save myself first because you can't die. There's no way to test your life and death skills, your reading skills. You're just kind of like, a lot of it's also autopiloting. They don't think outside of the box. They've always done it this way and they're always going to defend themselves first.
Got it. What are some of the other themes that you had? Was there anything else you had drafted up? So you had said, well, we were talking about reading, right? So we were talking about at my level to get further down closer to the 5Q range, what would start to come into play are some other things. So what are those things?
Yeah, a lot of what I see once you start getting into the single digit queues and you're ranking up is a lot of it starts being like reading because you're going to get into more fights. And a lot of those games, even in like the 9, 10, 11 Q ranges, just like one big fight determines who wins because it's so volatile. It's like one person plays it correctly, they kill, and it doesn't matter if they made 10-point mistakes elsewhere because the whole group was worth 100. So a lot of it is like, okay, who's reading cleaner? Who is reading better because those big fights start mattering, I guess, a little bit more, I would say, as you get closer to like 5Q and whatever.
Then you were saying once you get to around some level of dawn level, that's when reading really comes into play.
Yeah.
But you would
I
make
mean,
the
reading
argument
is
that,
always important. But yeah.
yeah, reading's always important, but right. So if somebody's really good at reading, and let's just say that they're still in the double digit or single digit queue,
Mhm.
they may very well rise through the ranks simply because they could read super well. But the point you were making was that the other way is somebody might not be tremendous at reading, but they've just done so many games. They've done so much pattern recognition that you quote unquote get to one done. Can you say anything else about that?
Yeah. So you need some amount of reading to get to dawn level or just like to rank up generally. But you can sort of manipulate the game in a way where you can have less reading decisions. So I would say you could probably get to one dawn if you can read like 5, 6 moves out sometimes. You generally need to do more than that, but you can sort of play in a way that simplifies decisions for yourself. Generally, it'll be like more Moyo stuff or just like third line, more territorial. And then you just put yourself in a spot where you don't have to read as much and you can beat a lot of players and get up to about, I'd say, 1 dan just playing like that.
And then I responded by saying, wow, really? Only 5 to 7 moves? I read 5 to 7 moves. And you said,
And then we tested it and you read out like 13 moves. So
fair, but that was really hard for me. But I think the key point is that when I look out 5 to 7 moves, I feel very low confidence in what the evaluation and judgment is at that point. So we talked about the fact that I was having a hard time visualizing the number of liberties around those groups when I read out that far, which almost is to say it's not even that useful at all if I can't do that. So that's something that I'm going to work on. The other reaction I have actually as we're thinking about it is that I've been lucky enough to play some teaching games like I do with yourself, but also with other players that are around the 2 to 3 queue on OGS. The interesting thing is that they seem to read quite a bit. I mean, they read obviously much better than I do. They also have much better understanding of all the different patterns and shapes that are happening. And yet still, it's like they're 2 and 3 queue OGS. If they're trying to get to 1 dan, it's somewhat asymptotic. You're getting there, but it is just slower and slower.
yeah, plateaus off because
Plateaus.
Yeah.
Right. So like, what do you make of that? So, I mean, if you're saying, hey, you just need to be reading a little bit and you can get there, does that still connect back? I mean, when I see them playing me or others, it's like, it seems like they're reading so much. So, I mean, am I just misjudging that?
Well, just because you could get to 1 dan with only reading 5 or 6 moves doesn't mean that most people are going to be doing that. Generally, a 1 dan is going to be better at reading than a 5 queue. Like your rank is just a combination of like how good you are at certain things. So there's like reading, judgment, counting. A lot of people aren't too good at that. Some people are really good at winning when they're already winning and they like hold on to a win. A lot of people just play so aggressive, they are very likely or more likely to lose games they're already winning. So there's like a lot of skills people have. And at the end of the day, it's like if you're on average winning 50% of the time against a 1 dan, then you are basically 1 dan by definition. So it's like there's a whole bunch of things. And I would say reading is very important. You could manipulate the game in a certain way that means you don't have to read as much. And that's why you could get to 1 dan. But most people that get to 1 dan are going to be able to read quite well, much more than 5 or 6 moves.
But then if you think about efficiency of how quickly you wanted to try to improve at the game, let's say that you could do a sheer volume of just playing a lot of games and somehow control how much you were or weren't reading versus playing fewer games, but you're really trying to read out. Like you're making a very intentional effort. It doesn't mean you're good at it, but you're trying. It sounds like the trying to read path would yield better results. Again, it's all contingent on how good you are, how much you're improving at the reading. Because it's like a lot of where I see people are really improving a lot. There's certainly exception is like they're just playing huge quantities of games.
Yeah. The big thing with reading too is like there's no way that you're going to be reading out 10 different branches, 10 moves deep on every single move. You just run out of time. You just like be exhausted after every move. So a lot of that is intuition. So it's like, okay, intuitively, I'm incentivized to read these 3 branches, and your brain just automatically knows because you've played thousands of games. And so once you know that, then it's like your brain's already trained to only look at these couple branches, and then you read a bit and that's it. So it's like they're going to have a 1 dan's going to have better intuition, just general feel for the game than a 10 queue almost all the time.
Got it. And it is funny. I mean, this is back to that point of like, it's probably just my lack of understanding of the ELO system, but it is strange to me that like within my correspondence rank on 19 by 19, I'm at like a 7.5 or 7.7 queue plus or minus 1. And yet when I look at all the opponents I've played, I think I've only beaten 1 7 queue, right? Everybody else has been something higher. So it's after 50, 60 games. So it's an interesting, again, I've not fully baked out why that is, but it's interesting. So cool. Awesome. Nathan, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yep, no problem.
our game-themed episode, not just around Go, but other games, I talked with Gazza White again, and we discussed the concept of cheating in Go and if there have been any recent examples of cheating, as well as how that compares to cheating in the world of chess, which has actually brought a lot of popularity to the game. So we're going to go ahead and shift over to that conversation. What have you seen around cheating? I mean, have there been any notable situations? And it's just interesting to me because one thing that's made the chess world particularly popular, and I'd love your thoughts on it, is that in the last year to two, there's been so many cheating allegations going on, particularly at the top of that game. And it has created a lot of interest. And one thing that they say is that when the chess players are playing online on chess.com, they're looking for these situations where somebody out of nowhere has a meteoric increase in their ranking and they go, wait a second, that's just not possible, or it's very unlikely. So to turn it back to you, Gaza, it doesn't seem, from what little I take in, because I really don't follow the professional side, but it doesn't seem like there's a million cheating allegations happening regularly. But have you seen any? Have there been any notable ones happening?
Regarding cheating allegations in professional Go, they're quite sparse. It's notable that when one does take place, typically the ones that do exist end up getting a lot of drama about it. And I think that's because it's so rare. One of the reasons why Go doesn't have as many cheating allegations is because, in the professional side at least, most of professional Go happens between four regions: Japan, China, Korea, and Taiwan. And they have their own official organizations. So Japan has the Neon Kiin and the Kansai Kiin. Korea has the Korean Baduk Association. China has the Chinese Weiqi Association, and so on. And when they hold tournaments, these organizations take on the responsibility of having the anti-cheating measures as well. And because these are professionals, these are also professional organizations. So there's definitely some level of professionalism involved in organizing of tournaments, and they seem to take anti-cheating seriously. Whereas in chess tournaments, often outside of the most popular tournaments, a lot of chess tournaments are sort of open tournaments where you'll have grandmasters, you'll have international masters, you have completely intermediate players, amateurs, and stuff like that. And although they're all run under FIDE, the international organization, it's typically run by representatives of FIDE from whichever country the tournament takes place in. So there's a lot of implicit trust that these FIDE representatives will make sure that cheating doesn't take place. For instance, I competed in a chess tournament recently, and there were certainly rules, like you couldn't have your phone with you and things like that. But if you were malicious enough and you wanted to cheat, it wouldn't have been all that difficult. That's the impression that I got. You can have family and friends be in the room watching your games.
Hmm.
So I had a friend who was there to watch my games, and if we both decided to be, really mean and win by whatever means possible, we could have come up with some sort of coding system or something to communicate moves or something like that, something ridiculous like that. Whereas with Go, at least when I watch the Korean tournaments on Baduk TV, it seems like it's much more strict in terms of how the games are policed.
Yeah, I was even hearing something like on the chess side, I heard that in-person games, there was one example where the coach was standing at a certain position around the board to try to help the player know where to play. I don't know how that would work on the Go board because there's just so many more positions, but
I think I
it
actually know
was
which
interesting.
tournament you're talking about.
Oh, really?
I think that was the Chess Olympiad in 2010. Yeah. But there actually has been a case this year in 2025 of a professional player getting caught for cheating. A Chinese player, Qin Sihui, was caught having a mobile phone basically in her lap during the National Go Championship individual women's event.
Hmm.
Actually, this event took place in December 2024, but most of the
Oh, okay.
news about it was available in 2025. But what seemed to have happened is that she hid the phone, entered the venue early before the tournament started and hid the phone so then she could access it during the competition, and then tried to lie about it after getting
Wow.
caught. Like basically didn't admit it and tried to, just lied about it to avoid getting caught. And she was punished extremely severely for it. She got her professional status revoked and banned for 8 years from any events organized by the Chinese Weiqi Association.
Wow. That's intense. Yeah, that's very premeditated.
Yes, in that case it was. It is still quite a rare thing for cheating to happen in professional events. In amateur events, I think it's a lot more Wild West and a lot harder to enforce, especially amateur events that happened during the pandemic when many events had to be held online. It would have been much, much more difficult to not only enforce cheating, but simply just to detect it as well.
That concludes our time for the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. This is All Things Go.